Welcome to the Story Geeks show. Today we are talking about a George presented topic, which is a lot of the topics that we talk about because George has a lot of ideas and they're all awesome. This particular idea is about sequels, but more specifically about the sequel characters that we already love and then new characters being introduced into those sequels and whether or not we gravitate towards those or what it takes to be a new sequel character. So we're going to talk about Disney sequels. We'll jump into some other areas of sequels as well and specifically get into the characters a little bit more. Welcome to the Story Geek Show, a part of the Orange Grove 55 network. And with me to discuss sequels is the aforementioned Italiano, George. How you doing, George?
Doing good, Jay. So glad to be here. And yeah, I can't wait to dive into this topic. I just love when certain things just pop into my head, which usually happens on an everyday basis, just randomly. I'm just sitting there doing something. I'm like, you know what? This seems like a good topic. And I thought, no one else can dissect this better than you. So that's like, there's got to be a Story Geeks.
George is over there shaving, going, sequels. Let's talk sequels.
Exactly. That's awesome. And where can folks find you, George? If they want more insights from the Italiano, where do they go?
Absolutely. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you can find me on Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
Excellent. Definitely go follow George. And we also have I don't know what we want to call him. Should we call him in honor of the Italiano?
Yeah, why not? He's the OG of the OG.
He's the OG of the OG and the Don of the family. Mr. OG 55. How are you, sir?
Very good, Jay. Thank you so much for having me on Story Geeks. Really looking forward to talking sequels with you guys, and it's good that I'm really glad we've had you on the channel a lot more lately. It's been really fun talking, even like the parks with you and everything. So yeah, it's been a good time, brother.
Yeah, it's been a blast. In fact, I messaged OG this morning, and I was like, dude, hey, Bricky's new video is fire because he's breaking down like what they're gonna do with the expansion stuff and Disneyland Forward, and OG's like, we already got a show on it, brother. It's coming out later today. I was like, oh, okay, cool, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was actually another George idea. He was like, have you seen the new Bricky thing? And I'm like, no. He's like, we got to do a reaction on this. And I actually watched it first time when we reacted to it. And cool. Fantastic stuff, man, about where the third park might go. Bricky's on his game. He's doing fantastic stuff over there.
Yeah, Ricky's doing amazing stuff. Someday we'll get him on the channel and he'll come on here and talk to us about all of his wisdom. But in the meantime, OG, where can people find you?
You can find me right here on Orange Grove 55 on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, Orange Grove 55, and on X or Twitter, whatever they're calling it nowadays, at Orange Grove 55. And again, Jay, thank you for having me on.
Yes, love it. So today we're talking about. So let me set this up for why George presented this to us, and then I want to talk a little bit about. Before we dive deeper into that, I want to talk a little bit about sequels, and I want to talk a little bit about characters in sequels. But the thing that George brought up was a really, really interesting topic, and it is with Inside Out coming out. Inside Out is a sequel from the first film, obviously, but in this new film, there are new characters introduced. And so, and by the way, this happens in a lot of Marvel movies that we could talk about it in the context of. We could talk about it in Star Wars because Star Wars has introduced like multiple generations of characters at this point. When you do a sequel, and the same thing probably applies to prequels as well, but you bring in new characters. What do those new characters have to accomplish? What makes a good character that you're bringing in to a sequel? What makes a bad character that you're bringing into a sequel? We want to discuss all of that stuff, but let's just start out and approach this topic. And I'll start with you, George. What are some of the sequels, maybe under the Disney umbrella, but it don't have to be, that you think have been some of the best sequels of all time? That you'd say like, oh, that film was a great follow up to the first film.
The first one that always comes to my mind is Toy Story 2.
Ooh.
Because I feel Toy Story 2 is actually the best out of the Toy Story franchises, in my opinion. And it was like a combination between, because I had seen the preview for Inside Out 2 with the new emotions, and I just got to thinking that they announced like with anxiety and envy, and envy is just adorable. Like if they end up making merch on her, I mean, I could see a bunch of people just like nabbing everything of her. But that's just my point. It's like, what gravitates people to look at these new characters and say this character is going to be successful in this film? So the more I was thinking about it, it took me right back to Toy Story 2, because you have characters like Jessie and Bullseye that are still incorporated under the Disney umbrella, even incorporated in the parks, in any kind of streaming, that's involving Pixar characters, where it almost makes you feel at a time where they were original characters in the first Toy Story, but they weren't. They were added cast, so to speak, but yet they are just as memorable, if not actually more. Actually, Jessie became more memorable than Bo Peep, and Bo Peep, and she was in the original movie. So that's what got me thinking. But Toy Story 2, that's like the first movie like under like the Disney and Pixar umbrella, because as I said, Toy Story 2 for me, I feel like was greater actually than the original.
Interesting. Yeah, I love it.
For me, I'm going to use Star Wars actually as an example, and I'm going to actually invoke a little Steve Jobs. This is kind of a weird kind of thing I'm playing with here.
Yeah. We got Pixar, we got Disney, we got Lucasfilm. I love this mix up.
It's wild. It's wild. So Steve Jobs once said that you either have a brand deposit or a brand withdrawal, right? So something adds value to the brand or something takes away from the brand. So, perfect example would be the prequels for Star Wars. I know technically they're not sequels, but they kind of were in a weird way, right?
I think we should count prequels and sequels, because to George's point, they're doing this from a character perspective. They're performing the same function in many regards.
Right. Exactly. So
and there's even an extra layer to Star Wars on that, which I'll tap into after you're done, OG.
Sure. Yeah. No, Star Wars has a lot to play with for sure. When you take a movie like The Phantom Menace, you take a character like Jar Jar Binks. No one liked him, right? People still don't like him, really. But he would be what you call a brand withdrawal, right? He kind of like, he kind of hurt the franchise a little bit, right? So that character was a brand withdrawal. Where you take a character like, say, I don't know, like Darth Maul, who fans love Darth Maul. They were mad that he died in the first, that movie. He was a brand like deposit, right? So it kind of depends on like, okay, so what makes a good character? Why did Jar Jar get panned, but like Darth Maul didn't, right? And I think it comes down to when you're inserting new characters in like an existing franchise. I think if they add value to the existing, franchise, and they work well with what you already have, and it matches, say, the tone and the energy of the original, I think you're good. Like, for example, when George was mentioning Jessie, perfect character for the Toy Story franchise. She fits right in, right? She's basically like the girl version of Woody, right? So she fit right in that world, and boom, she's off to the races, no pun intended. And she's just a perfect match. But a character like Jar Jar in Star Wars, it just never felt right. It never felt really Star Warsy. A lot of fans felt like he was kind of like almost more like Goofy than he was anything Star Wars, right? So when you insert him into this franchise, people rejected it. But Darth Maul looks like something that you would see in the Star Wars universe. He fit that universe, that franchise well. So he was a brand deposit. So that's kind of how I would determine. So and this is the tricky thing, right? When it comes to sequels and prequels, when you put new characters into these existing franchises, it's risky. It's very risky because it's almost like a group of friends that you have, like that you've been friends for a long, long time, and then you bring in like the new, like a new person. It's like that new person could fit right in with the group and be and mesh well, and that new person might not at all. You know what I'm saying? It's the same kind of dynamic with new characters, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, I would agree. Jesse's great. Darth Maul. These are characters that work. Go ahead, George.
And speaking that you mentioned Star Wars, OG, I'm going to add an extra layer onto this cinema lasagna, if you will.
Just don't add Parmesan, bro. Just no Parmesan.
Exactly. Well, actually, you know what? It's funny that you actually mentioned Parmesan because I just realized as you were talking, I actually found something that you utilize a lot, like when you and folks, I'll discuss this later on, but like when you use the term like Parmesan-y, like you even just use that when you said Star Wars-y. It's like you try to find like the perfect word for it, but you just like put it in the context of just adding an E to it at the end of it. It's like it's that Star Wars-y kind of thing. You know, I love it. It works. But again, speaking of Star Wars, you even take a character like Anakin in, just to say, the Phantom Menace that you mentioned. Even though that's not technically a new character because it's basically Darth Vader in the future, but in the future he becomes Darth Vader.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. Sorry, I was speaking from the prequel on. Yeah, but yes, Darth Vader from the past, but in. Yeah, whatever. Okay. So anyway, but technically, as a creative standpoint, it's almost like it's a new character in its own, because what you have to do is you have to showcase Anakin as for who he was before he became Vader. Because it's almost like when you take Obi-Wan Kenobi, when he was talking to Luke in A New Hope, he was basically almost talking about two separate people when he said Vader killed your father. So even though Anakin transitioned into Vader, it's almost starting off fresh because you have to create a whole new boundary, so to speak, for this character, because it's this young boy. He's innocent. He doesn't know what's going on. He's trying to find his place in this galaxy far, far away, not knowing his fate is going to become basically one of the most evil, dastardly villains in the Star Wars universe. So I thought that's even kind of genius in a way where that could have even been a hit or miss, because you know, you take that in that aspect of, okay, well, could this child be compelling enough that can seem real, that you look at him, he has that innocence, but then you can see this pain, this hurt, this fear, you know, and it carries with that character up to the point when he actually becomes Vader. And for me, I noticed the transition when Anakin became Vader, like right as his mother died. And when Hayden Christensen looks up like into the camera, and you can just see in his eyes, you could see that pain and hatred turning over into the dark side. And that's where you can kind of see that transition. But then that also goes to the notion of even to the actors that portray them. Can they be convincing enough to pull off this new character? Because sometimes that could be a hit or miss. You know, you do like a casting call and it's like, well, we have this great character, but can this actor portray this character and make he or she believable?
Yeah, that was a great example, though. Anakin, you're right. Technically, it's Vader, technically, but even in the franchise, it's almost considered a different character because, like you said, the way Obi-Wan refers to him and stuff. That was a great example, George. Well done, sir. I
really like using the term brand deposits or withdrawals too. Like that's a really cool way of talking about it. From if I just start out with saying like, what are some of my favorite sequels? Some of which don't introduce any new characters that I can think of off the top of my head at all. But the three sequels that come to mind are now all under the Disney umbrella, but none of them were created under the Disney umbrella to begin with, which is funny. But Empire Strikes Back, to go to the Star Wars well again, is like one of the best, maybe the best sequel of all time, to be honest. Like Godfather 2, I think people talk about, that's not under the Disney umbrella, so I won't go there too far, but I don't think it is. It wasn't. I don't think it was Fox.
No. But I do agree with that notion. I think part 2 was actually the best out of the three Godfathers.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. I'm not familiar enough with I've seen them, but I'm just not familiar enough with it to go back and think like what was in each one. I'm like, I remember the overview. So Empire Strikes Back is huge. Empire Strikes Back does introduce new characters because you get Lando, you get Yoda, you get Boba Fett, which is barely a character. You get the Emperor, again, barely a character. So we can talk about that as an example. The other one I thought of that I can't think of a character who's introduced in this one, but Back to the Future 2, I think is a fantastic sequel to Back to the Future. Back to the Future trilogy is amazing. Can't think of any new characters though coming out of that one, which is really interesting that you could pull off as good of a sequel without introducing any new major characters. That's really fascinating. And then the third one is, of course, I have to go to my Indiana Jones well and say that Temple of Doom was a fantastic sequel. But Temple of Doom actually has really good examples of characters who are introduced that don't work as well, and then characters who are introduced that do work phenomenally well. So we have plenty of examples that we can dig deeper into. Any other sequels that you think we should bring up as a part of this conversation? Toy Story 2 is fantastic. The prequels were fantastic. Any other ideas? I mean, Blade Runner 2049 is a pretty killer sequel to Blade Runner. But
a prequel actually sticking under the Disney and Pixar umbrella, which I like the characters, but I don't think that they created an impact where they're memorable, where a lot of people can say, "Oh, I remember their names." Is actually with Monsters University. It's a prequel to Monsters Inc., where they add the new the new characters that work alongside Mike and Sully in the monster games and everything. But again, they're new, but are they compelling enough to carry on beyond the film?
Right.
And honestly, it's like once you watch them, okay, you're in that moment. It's like, okay, he's a cool character. He's a funny character. He's an interesting character. But then once the movie's over, that character then has to be good enough to stick in your mind to say, oh, I want to know more about this character.
Yeah.
And I feel like those characters don't really hit the mark.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think so. So let's dive into the first one that doesn't introduce new characters, and let's analyze that one first. So I don't think that Back to the Future Part 2 really introduces us to any new characters that matter much to the story, or that will matter even much to the trilogy. Because in the third one, you do get Doc's girlfriend is added, right? And she's a kind of a major character. But the second one, I mean, so if you're going to take a sequel and you're going to say, like, we're not going to introduce any new characters, which seems pretty unique to me, you're basically saying that we're going to continue where we left off with the last story, which is an interesting technique, right? Like, we're going to continue where we left off with the last story. Empire Strikes Back does that a little bit. But basically what you're saying is the character from the beginning of the film, from film 1, throughout film 2, is going on an elongated character arc, right? Almost is what you're saying, because they might go through 2 like kind of minor character arcs, but they're not going to go through like 2 major character arcs. Is unlikely in a sequel. So like I think of Back to the Future 1 is really about Marty being able to say, like, I appreciate my family, and I'm not going to react to being called a chicken. Right? Like, those are the 2 things that Marty has to learn by the end of that film. And those aren't like major character arcs. Marty doesn't become a super different person, but he has to learn to behave differently. He has to appreciate his family and not react to people calling him a chicken, because he sees what other people's reactions being bad are. And he also sees how he can appreciate his family and not look at them as like total losers, which is kind of how he looks at them in the beginning of the first film, to be honest. So in the second film, then you're just basically picking up where Marty left off, and you're saying, okay, well, now what Marty does is and I think it's actually it's almost more of like a Marty versus Biff, which one will succumb to the temptation of trying to change the future in like a very selfish way. And like they're looking at Biff and they're being like, well, he already did that, so now I have to come back and like I have to not repeat Biff's mistakes. So that's an interesting technique, but you don't really introduce any new characters there. In Empire Strikes Back, we get Yoda, we get Lando. Who else do we get in Empire Strikes Back as a new character?
Trying to think.
There's got to be more. Emperor I mentioned, but Emperor's barely in it.
Yoda.
Yep, we got Yoda. So so let's do the brand withdrawal, brand deposit thing. Yoda, got to be a deposit.
A deposit, absolutely. Yeah. You can't. I mean, Yoda's one of those characters where you can't. He's synonymous with the franchise at this point.
Yes.
I can't picture Star Wars without Yoda. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So he not only is a brand deposit, he's like one of the arteries. Like he's
right.
he's essential. You know what I'm saying? He's essential.
Yeah.
So he was absolutely a brand deposit.
Lando, I think he's more of a brand pending because starting out when you first get introduced to this character, you don't really know. Are we going to see more of this character? Is he going to have a bigger significance into the franchise or into the film moving forward? Right. Is this going to be like a fly-by-night character where we just see him in one scene? Like, we don't really know where his character goes until you progressively move through the film. Mm-hmm. So I always saw Lando as kind of like that brand pending. So it's kind of like in that middle ground. And of course, we all like to take the high ground. No pun intended.
Exactly.
But because his character kind of fluctuates, right, where it's like for him, he's just kind of like doing this wheeling and dealing, and then he, finds out, this was like a big trap. It's a trap for Han and Leia and Chewie, and and then he kind of changes his way of saying, okay, well, this has to be more than me just, making money. It's right, like I have to, help my friends. And he becomes, he receives a greater story arc as he goes on. So I would say starting out, he's a brand pending, but then he is a more of a brand deposit moving forward.
So is it, I like I use the word pending, like it's an ACH, like 3 business days, right, George?
Yes.
Interesting one too would be the Guardians franchise, right? The Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, because in part 2, I believe Little Mantis was introduced.
Oh yeah. That's right.
I liked her a lot. I thought she was definitely a brand deposit. I thought she's really dope. She's one of those characters where it's like, she's kind of like, maybe not quite, she's not quite a Yoda, but you can't really picture that franchise without her at this point. I mean, she's,
But then there's characters, as you had mentioned about the Guardians, that you wish they had a bigger part. You want to know more of like Benicio del Toro's character, the Collector. It's like he's not shown throughout the whole entire movie. He has like bits and pieces of parts, but his character seems very interesting. Like I want to know more about him, and especially because then you do see a little bit more, not to dive into the parks, but how he has a great significance in Mission Breakout. And it's like, okay, that's really cool how they incorporated a character that really had nothing really to do with the first Galaxy, Guardians of the Galaxy, but they gave him his own storyline to create this e-ticket attraction.
Well, speaking of Benicio del Toro, who I love, he's a fantastic actor.
Oh yeah,
but his character in Last Jedi was
right. He doesn't. So what you guys are saying is really intriguing to me, because one of the rules that we're actually coming up with as a part of this conversation is that the character, and George was hinting at this earlier with Monsters University, the introduction of the new characters have to have some significance in the way that they interact with our characters that we already love. Because the characters that don't do that, so for example, let's just take Yoda versus Lando Lando Light, we'll call him, in Empire Strikes Back, versus Jar Jar. Jar Jar Binks doesn't have any perceivable effect on any of the main characters besides being sort of an annoying roadblock to them at times. But he doesn't really impact the story in any major ways. He doesn't influence Anakin in any deep, meaningful way. He doesn't help Ewan McGregor's character, Obi-Wan Kenobi, in any meaningful way. If you contrast that with Yoda, if you contrast that with Yoda has a deep, meaningful impact on Luke. He imparts wisdom to Luke. He explains the Force in more detail. He gives him a warning about what he should or should not do. And then he basically accepts his fate and passes away, right? And he becomes one with the Force. And I find that really interesting, because George's example of Monsters University is sort of the same thing. It's like that story is still really about Mike and Sully. It's not about the other characters they're introducing necessarily. So I'm wondering if we can set that aside as one of the rules. If you're going to introduce new characters, they have to be influential to the lead characters while still maintaining their own mystique, right? Like I gotta have both, because Lando's a little bit of that. To George's point about pending, like he's a little bit of that, but he's not as impactful as Yoda is. And even the Emperor, the small glimpse of the Emperor that we get to see in Empire Strikes Back, it is very apparent that the Emperor is influencing Darth Vader in very meaningful ways, because Darth Vader bows to the guy. He waits to hear what his orders are. Like, this is a serious character. We can't say that this is going to be like a throwaway character that's like, that vanishes somehow.
Look how he became such a big part of the universe ultimately. Like he was such a brand deposit. Like, he's like a Yoda. You can't picture this franchise without the Emperor. I mean, he is the franchise.
Yeah, which, let's do a detour here, because a lot of people were upset that the Emperor was included in The Rise of Skywalker. So what about the Emperor's inclusion in The Rise of Skywalker made that a brand withdrawal?
See, and actually, I was kind of one of those people. And the reason why for me was because of how Rian Johnson got rid of Snoke.
Yes.
Because for me, when I saw The Force Awakens and they introduced Snoke, I was so intrigued by that character. I thought, this is a brand new character, never mentioned before in any of the movies. This is a complete creation, like out of nowhere, like an amalgam. It's just like, and it's like, I want to know more of him. Like, how did he come into this universe? How did he latch on to Kylo Ren to influence him to come over to the dark side? Like, what does he have to gain out of it? I want to know more of his backstory. And I thought that's what we were going to get with The Last Jedi. I was so excited for The Last Jedi because I thought we were going to get more of the origin of Snoke. And to me, that was just a complete epic failure. It actually went from, for me, a pending to a bankruptcy. It's like I felt like that character got completely cheated, where he had the potential to carry that whole trilogy as the villain. And I just felt like when JJ got put back on board with Rise of Skywalker to go off of what Rian Johnson did with the Last Jedi, it's like, okay, well, I gotta have to, and I think that was the direction Abrams was going with Snoke, and then it got all completely changed in the creative process, and he's like, okay, well, now I got to try to figure out, I can't create another whole new villain, because how am I going to justify this character's background in just one movie. Film? Exactly. Right. So he's like, you know what? I got to bring a showstopper. How could I do that? Oh, I'll bring back the Emperor.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. I think when it came to Palps, I think everyone loves Palps. He's one of my favorite characters. You can't go wrong with Palpatine.
He's great.
He's fantastic. He's just pure evil. You gotta love him. He's just great. But as villains go, you know what I'm saying? As villains go, he's awesome. But the thing with Palps in the sequel trilogy was that, you're right, George. It was very thrown in there. I think if it was setting it up from the beginning, and they were giving us those breadcrumbs in the beginning, I think people would have been fine with it. Interesting thing too, and you mentioned Snoke, George. That's a whole nother can of worms, because Snoke, talking about like sequel characters, that was a very tragic like kind of arc for a sequel character, because like you were saying, a lot of people love that character. People were intrigued by that character in The Force Awakens. I
did. I bought a collector figure of Snoke sitting on the throne. After I saw The Last Jedi, I took my receipt and I took it back. I was pissed.
Yeah, I was pissed. See, that's a character that would have had, and he's kind of a forgotten character now, right?
Yeah.
Because nothing really happened with the guy, But like, that's a character that could have had huge potential if they would have followed through with his story.
Yeah.
But they didn't, And look, I love the throne room scene as one of my favorite scenes of all of Star Wars. As a scene itself, oh gosh, that scene is amazing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love that battle with Ben and Ray fighting off the guards.
Dude.
That was especially when they did that slow motion of the movement, but it was how they killed Snoke.
Well, it was. Well, see, this is funny. I liked how they killed him. I liked the surprise element.
Yeah,
but
I'm sorry,
cool.
He went down like a little bitch. I'm sorry. That was.
I like the surprise element. I was like, oh my god, this is nuts. The issue though was like, it's kind of like getting drunk, right? You're at a party, you're drunk, everything's fantastic. You know what I'm saying? Things are going great, but the next morning you're like, ooh man. What did I do? The ramifications start to hit you, right? Yeah. That was the throne room for me. It was like, oh my god, this is Star Wars. I'm nerding out. This is dope. They totally like surprised me with this. And then when it's over, you're like, well now what?
Yeah,
it was like one of those moments, So
I have probably spent a 40-hour work week talking about The Last Jedi in my life. So I'm not going to go into this in detail, but one of the most fascinating arguments that I think is related to this topic, and my co-writer Nathan Sheck and I do this a lot we argue about this a lot, is where do you place the blame? Because there's 3 places that you can place blame with the sequel trilogy. And the Rise of Skywalker and the weak. There's actually 4 places you could put it. Let me add one more. I'll describe why each one of them probably contributes to the problem that is the Rise of Skywalker. The first people you can blame are actually the audience, right? Because the audience, a large portion of the audience, basically demanded that Kylo Ren get redeemed. So whether or not Disney wanted to redeem Kylo Ren or make him the biggest bad of all the bads, the audience basically said, like, you're not doing that. Kylo Ren has to get redeemed, right? Not everybody, but a big enough vocal portion of the audience basically said, like, there's no chance you can not redeem Kylo Ren, right? So the audience is to blame in some portion of it. Rian Johnson is to blame in some portion of it because he killed Snoke and he created the problem of who's the badder villain. Now, you can argue that the audience screwed over Rian Johnson because Rian Johnson wanted to take Kylo and make him the bigger bad. And the audience said, no, you can't do that. We want Ben redeemed. We want Ben Solo redeemed. The interesting discussion. The third person you can blame is J.J. Abrams, because you can say, well, J.J. Abrams clearly didn't have a very good plan. He brought back the Emperor. I'm not a J.J. Abrams super fan, but in this particular regard, as a storyteller, I'm a J.J. Abrams apologist. Because I'm like, what was the guy supposed to do? Like, he killed off Snoke, and he can't make Kylo bad, and you can't redeem a character in one movie, which brings up the fourth argument, that Disney's to blame because they should have greenlit 2 movies. They should have greenlit 2 movies because they killed off Snoke. They thought that Leia was going to be the original era trilogy character to focus on in the 3rd movie, and Carrie Fisher tragically passed away. And Disney should have said, oh, we need to go back to the drawing board and refigure this out and not force ourselves to put out the 3rd movie in the trilogy that ends everything in the next year and a half, right? So some portion of what's wrong with the sequel trilogy is to blame on all 4 of those different groups, and each person's going to put their different percentages of who's to blame the most. But I will tell you that, like, what we're talking about now is this introduction of sequel characters. By the way, The Rise of Skywalker has a lot of why did you introduce that character to us and what role do they play?
Exactly.
There's a lot of that.
Well, technically, Jay, you said that there were 4 to blame. There's actually 5. You missed one.
Oh, no. Who did I miss?
Jar Jar Binks. If you
You're right.
Jar Jar Binks is always on the table.
You just got to just blame him. But actually, what I would have done is if Rian Johnson wanted to take out Snoke the way he did, a great plot twist that I would have done, and to kind of appease the fans, since he was going to go that route, have been redeemable, but then do the opposite for Rey. And when she found out that she was a Palpatine, she felt, okay, well, now that's my destiny. So basically, the roles would have flopped, and she would have then became the antagonist to Ben becoming the protagonist.
Yeah, that would have been super cool. I still think you would have needed 2 movies to do it.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, because like at the end of Last Jedi, you basically have the perception that Kylo is going down a darker path because you can't convince me otherwise, because he literally launches a full scale assault on Luke Skywalker, right? Like you can't take him and all of a sudden turn him around in the 3rd movie and be like, oh, now he's good. Which I know you're not saying, George. You're saying there should be 2 movies. You're agreeing with me, but like that's what would have been really difficult for J.J. Abrams to do. But also you have the problem of Rey perceptively choosing the correct choice, and therefore you would have had to build in why she got eviler, right? Like basically. So I think that the end result of that discussion is that there should have been 4 movies, period. And Disney made a mistake of not greenlighting 4 movies. Yeah, exactly. They were all going to be billion-dollar movies anyways. Like, you know what I mean? Like, why shoehorn in a movie that doesn't need to be shoehorned in when you can make another one and make another $1 billion? Giant. I think Disney, the people who I've argued this with the most, with the one thing that we all agree on, no matter where you fall into Rian Johnson or J.J. Abrams or whatever, everybody falls into the camp of like, yeah, Disney really missed an opportunity there and created their own problem by not just greenlighting 2 movies.
Yeah, I think Disney got a little like bogged down with the kind of like traditional, the traditionalism of like, we've always had 3.
Yeah.
So it's like we gotta stick with 3, and that's an example of like, and this is a whole nother rabbit hole, but like that's kind of where even Disney gets into this sometimes, where it's like sometimes you need to break away from tradition. It's for the betterment of the overall good. You know, sometimes you want to be traditional, you want to kind of carry on things, but with something like that, I think it would have been better to have the better story. Than just to have just to say it was a trilogy, because we had 2 other trilogies. You know, it was a very superficial thing. But I think Disney was worried. Oh man, if we do 4, fans are going to get mad because this is a 4 movie thing, not a trilogy, and they got bogged down in that.
Me personally, and that's where a little bit of my OCD comes in, because I would have preferred 4, because then that would have made 10 movies instead of 9. I prefer an even number, so it's like. You know, and that's what I would have done. I would have did The Force Awakens, Last Jedi Part 1, Last Jedi Part 2, and Rise of Skywalker, inspired by Last Jedi. So that's
now I do want to say one thing to you guys too. It actually just came to me, and this is not Star Wars related. It's actually Disney animation.
Ooh.
So The Rescuers. Okay, George, what was the name of the little girl in The Rescuers? Was it Penny?
Penny.
Okay, so that movie. I think it's okay. I think it's kind of like one of those like B or C tier kind of Disney animated films. It's not up there with like Snow White or Beauty and the Beast or any of those. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like so it was okay. That character Penny, I think, was okay. You know, but the sequel though, Rescuers Down Under, I think was infinitely better, and Cody, I think, was a stronger character than the original. I don't know. What do you think about that, George? Because I know you.
I think, and I do agree with you. And I think the main reason was the Rescuers introduced the characters of Bernard and Bianca. So they took like the frontal part of understanding like who they are. It's like, okay, we got to go rescue this child because we're part of the Rescue Aid Society. So we have to rescue this child. So they just threw Penny in there just so it would create a story arc for them. In Rescuers Down Under, we already adapted to those characters. We know who they are. We know what they're about. So, okay, so let's dive in and let's give the next child a little bit more meat on those bones, so to speak, and he kind of has a better story arc, and I think that's where it made just the whole entire film much better than the original.
That's an example where I think the characters, because we're talking a lot about sequels in this episode, right? And about how that like new characters need to sort of fit with the old ones to be successful, or you know. But I think in this example, it's kind of weird because I almost feel like the new characters were better than the old ones. The old one, like you know what I'm saying? Like I don't think Penny, like I've said, Penny was not as strong a character as Cody. I even think that even the eagle in Rescuers Down Under, like I know it's not.
Marahute.
There you go, Marahute. Thank you, George. See, George has this infinite knowledge. I never remember the name of the eagle. Marahute. I think that was even a fantastic character. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there were so many good characters in there that were better than the original, which is interesting. You know, you don't really. I mean, I guess you kind of see it sometimes, but I don't know. I thought that was an interesting example because it seems like pretty prevalent in that one. You know, did you see that movie, Jay? Rescuer Down Under?
Again, it's like The Godfather. I've seen it, but it's been so long since I've seen it that I don't even remember any of the names of the characters. I need to watch it again for sure.
But
So,
in that, really quick, but to your point, OG, that's just how I was saying earlier of how I feel Jesse became more popular than Bo Peep. Because it makes me wonder. Now, there may be more logistics behind it, but maybe that's why Bo Peep was never featured in Toy Story 3. Because, I mean, they had her in Toy Story 1, they had her in Toy Story 2, and it's like, okay, well, what more can we really do with this character? And then that's where they kind of changed her up in Toy Story 4, where they kind of turned her into this porcelain ninja woman. And it's like so it's like a complete different like transition from how she was, that she was this prim, proper, dainty, fragile kind of character, and then she just turns into like where she's like all bandaged up and she's like using her hoarding staff, whatever you call it, as like her like weapon or whatever. It's like, geez. And it's like, but they had to create something because I felt like the character was very flatlined. They kind of had to give her something to kind of go on. I mean, I'm not a fan of Toy Story 4 in general, but and that was another reason too why I want to bring this up, because it's going to be the years of the sequels. I mean, we're getting Toy Story 5, we're getting Zootopia 2, we're getting Moana 2. It's like, it makes me wonder now, because with these sequels coming out, obviously we're going to get new characters, and it makes me wonder what path Disney and Pixar are going to take with this. Are we going to get even more memorable characters? Because it feels like even in Toy Story 4, the only character that kind of made a little bit of an impact, I don't know. I find him obnoxious, but is Forky. But it's like, I know that a lot of people like really gripped on that character, and I feel like
is that a joke? Gripped on Forky?
Yes, there you go.
I don't know. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Well, you're right. I mean, Inside Out 2 is coming out too, right? I mean, and that introduces a lot of new characters. I mean, anxiety and envy and even embarrassment with the little hoodie and stuff. It looks adorable. It looks absolutely adorable. But I think that movie, and I could be completely wrong, you know, it hasn't come out yet. I haven't seen it yet. I think that movie will definitely succeed in these new characters.
And it will succeed. And I feel like the characters will do their job in the movie. But this is actually what made me even think of this topic. After the movie is over and people leave the theater, or after people shut off their TV because they may even wait for it to come on streaming, how much of an impact will these new emotions be?
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about too, because one of the things we're also talking about, we haven't specifically said this yet, but I think we can, is that how is the new character worked into the plot, and are they essential to the plot or not essential to the plot? Because like, I think that one of the problems that Disney has had in the past is that Disney has forced sequels that do not have a reason to exist. But when we talk about Inside Out 2, what did we see from the first Inside Out? It was about Riley kind of coming of age into her preteen era and dealing with all of the emotions that she was experiencing relative to a life event. If you say now Riley is getting a little bit older into her teenage years, and is she going to college now? Is that part of it too?
I think it's high school. They kind of teased it at the very end of Inside Out 2, where they updated the panel board and they say they see the big red button and they say, "What's puberty?"
Yeah, exactly. And but we can kind of see a reason for the plot to enhance and there be new emotions, because we know that as you get older, there are more emotions. So it's almost like a no-brainer. It makes like, oh yeah, makes all the sense in the world. Yeah. No pun intended. So I think that, but like, for example, I would make an argument that the Frozen sequel is in my opinion, a sequel that didn't even need to be made. Now, there's
Thank
not
you.
necessarily a lot of new characters there, but like, what was the only rationale was we made a lot of money off the first one. We should probably make another one.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. And I love the first one. I love the first one a lot. I liked the second one, but the second one isn't very memorable. I mean, I got to be honest. I don't really remember much from it at all. I think the only new character that I can even remember is that little like lizard thing that would change color.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But is that even a thing? Like, no, it's like a forgotten character, right?
Yeah. Which that's what kind of worries me with now, because we're going to get Frozen 3 and 4, which is basically going to be a 2-parter movie. It's going to be a part 1 and a part 2. But it's like, if there wasn't really too much of an impact on the sequel, what is it going to really be for number 3 and 4? Are people interested enough to really dive deep into this? And people will say, well, it'll be $1 billion movie. Well, of course it is. It's because it's Frozen. It's because you're going off the back of the first film. The first film was so memorable that when you see the title Frozen and then you see a number 2 next to it, or a number 3 or a number 4, it's like, oh yeah, well, I invested all my time into seeing the first Frozen, so I have to go see the sequels.
Right.
They need another character in this next sequel for Frozen that's like another Anna. Now, I don't mean literally another Anna or anything like that, but a character on that level where people resonate with that character and it's iconic and it has its, they need another character like that. And that was one of the big problems with part 2. It didn't have any of that.
And I have a question to really ask you both. And this has been like bugging the hell out of me since Frozen 2 came out. Who the hell is Samantha?
Oh, I know. Yeah. I think that was just a funny, old.
But I mean, but I'm like they could have came up with something or anything. But he's like, Samantha. It's like, who's Samantha? Maybe that'll be the story arc for number 3. Maybe we'll find out who Samantha is. Maybe she's the new Anna.
I feel like I saw a improv lines video or something like that where Josh Gad was talking about how he just kind of threw that out there and they stuck with it because they thought it was funny. Yeah. So we might not ever see Samantha, but we need to because that's just bizarre. No, but I think so. I think Disney has this problem with like feeling like it needs to make sequels to successful films, even though there's not. So one of the reasons that prequels are so popular in the modern day is because studios want to make a movie with the same characters, but a lot of creators are like, I mean, we already finished that character's arc. Like, there's nothing more for them to go on and do necessarily, right? It's a little easier, I think, if you have an ensemble because you can kind of like focus on a different aspect of the ensemble, which is why Toy Story works really well moving forward, except for maybe the 4th one because that doesn't have a reason to exist besides Disney wanting money. But I think that prequels give you another excuse as a creator because as a creator, you usually have a giant list of like backstory things that happened to your character before they arrived in this particular story because we have to know like, well, why did they get so if you're like talking about my story Death of a Bounty Hunter, why did this character become isolated? Why did he become a bounty hunter? Why did all of these things happen in his life? Well, we kind of want to know like what happened, and so you can go back to the same characters, but there's this interesting backstory that got to them to the point where you start the original story, right? But with sequels, it's almost like you have to have an excuse to keep that story going. So George Lucas was like sort of a genius because he wrote 3 movies and then he did Star Wars in a way that it could have just ended right there and been cool. But also he ended it to an extent where he's like, well, Darth Vader is not really dead. I can bring him back if I need to. By the way, there's an emperor that I can introduce. So it's even bigger and broader threat to the galaxy. So I think I think Disney specifically,
and Marvel's guilty of that as well. Like Marvel is like,
so
Marvel, like they bring back, they bring back more people from the dead than actually more than Christ got resurrected. It's like, good Lord.
And that's actually a comic book thing in general. Yeah. I think,
Yeah. Because I think they even said that Aunt May is possibly to return for Spider-Man 4.
Really?
Oh yeah. so,
oh boy.
I mean, I don't know how relevant that is, but I mean, there's talks that she may be coming back. But to your point, Jay, of what you were saying about with the prequels and everything, but that's where I felt like it kind of hurt Monsters University kind of going back to that, because then they created these characters that was working alongside Mike and Sully, for which they created a kind of like a friendship with.
Right.
And it ended on a good note, which was good if that was a standalone movie. Then you're going to move into the original Monsters, Inc., and none of those characters are brought up, obviously, because that movie was made before Monsters University.
Right.
But it almost kind of throws it off in translation, because if they left on a good note with those characters, and it's like, then they're never seen or mentioned again. So for me, I kind of would have created something of a notion where it's like, you know, it was nice to have met you guys. You know, I know we're never going to see each other again, sort of thing. So it kind of makes sense for the original. And then they don't even put them in Monsters at Work, because Monsters at Work is basically like the sequel series to the original.
That was actually one of my big pet peeves, because I do have OCD, and that was actually one of my big pet peeves. Again, not to bring up Star Wars, but with Star Wars, with like how influential Ahsoka was to Anakin's lead up to being Vader. Mm-hmm. But in the original trilogy, there's no mention of Ahsoka, because obviously she wasn't created yet. Yeah. But it was a weird continuity thing. And that's why I do kind of like, though, that Filoni and them are kind of inserting these like in the timeline with various series and things like that, sort of creating continuity around it, so it makes a little more sense. But that was one of my big pet peeves. Still kind of is, but
I love how you just did that, OG. You're like, not to bring up Star Wars again, but back to Star Wars.
there's just so many examples of Star Wars with this particular topic, because it's like, I mean, and you can even get into the character of Ahsoka, where it was like really interesting, because technically it wasn't a sequel, but it's the broader franchise. And then how in that Clone Wars movie, fans hated her. I mean, it was like, really didn't like her introduction, but now she's one of the most beloved Star Wars characters of all time, which is interesting, you know?
So I'm gonna pull up a list. This is how we'll end the conversation today, because this has been a really great conversation. We've kind of discovered that the new characters need to have their own personas, but they need to have an impact on the former characters that we used to know. They have to have a reason to be imported into the plot and have it make sense. But also, you should be asking yourself the question of, should you even have a sequel that would need new characters in the first place? So here, why don't we end with this?
And Jar Jar Binks needs to go away.
Yeah, actually they redeemed the actor too, because the actor's cool, and he got that sequence in Ahsoka. Or was it Ahsoka?
It was
before. It was Kenobi.
Book of Boba or Kenobi?
I was just gonna say, was it?
I forget.
I forget which one it is, but he had an awesome sequence.
Yeah, Ahmed Best. Ahmed Best
got his redemption arc.
He's the best.
Cool. Yeah, he's the best. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read off the sequels that are coming out this year. They're not all Disney sequels. And then we're going to say, do we think they have a reason to exist, and how excited are we to see them?
Okay, cool.
Does that sound good?
Awesome. And I do want to say, Jay, before we start, the new character that just entered your screen behind you, I love him already. Yeah.
Yeah. He's kind of boring right now, but Gatsby, hey, buddy. Say hi to the whole... Say hi. He's like, I don't know. I don't do screens, Dad. All right. So the first sequel we got up is one that we're in a process of talking about, and that's Deadpool 3. So what do you think? Deadpool 3, does it need to exist, and are you excited about it?
Yes and yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think not even just for Deadpool, but I think for the whole sake of Marvel, getting back on track and introducing the X-Men in this particular MCU fashion, where, you're bringing even back Hugh Jackman. Because I think for all of us, Hugh Jackman is Wolverine, no matter what. It's like, and then they got him in his original yellow uniform, and just kind of having that banter back and forth with Deadpool. But it also does great for the Deadpool franchise as well, because Deadpool is a character that is... I used the term fly-by-night earlier, but he is a fly-by-night character, but it works in his advantage, because you could basically put him in anything, anywhere, at any time, and it would make sense.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What about you, OG?
Oh, absolutely. I'm very excited for Deadpool and Wolverine. It's actually one of the first Marvel movie in a long time that I'm actually excited for. Does it need to exist? Yeah, I think it's it's kind of a perfect storm for this movie, because for a number of reasons. The MCU is on the struggle bus right now, really bad, So I think this movie can be used as a kind of a reset. We've talked about it before a lot on the channel, but I think it's a good reset movie. Number one. Number two, Disney bought Fox, and that in and of itself provides a truckload of material for this character. I mean, and they do dive into that. We've seen the fight scene with the 20th Century Fox logo, like ancient ruins and stuff. So I think just off of the Fox buyout alone, I mean, there's so much you can do with it. So yeah, absolutely, it absolutely does need to exist. And I think that I think it'll do very well, and I'm super excited for it. Now, here's the thing, though, is this is one of those movies, though. I mean, one of these franchises where it can get old pretty fast. So, right, in my opinion. So I think what you'd have to do in order to keep this thing going, like if they want to do a 4 and 5 and whatever, you got to be creative in how you handle this, because otherwise it can get a little repetitive, I think, in my opinion. So I think this one, yes, definitely needs it. I think going forward, though, into 4 and 5 and whatever, they just have to be careful on how they kind of handle it, because it can get a little, I don't know, repetitive, I guess would be a word for it. It's also not handled correctly.
Yeah, it's also hard to top bringing Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine. You know what I mean?
Right,
like,
exactly.
That's an excuse alone to make the film. And so, like, yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm all for it. I do totally agree with George as well, that I feel like Deadpool, there are certain types of characters that there's always an excuse to make a film about them. James Bond is one of them, right? Just put him in a new scenario. We want to see it. Indiana Jones was one until they pretty much burned out that whole franchise, right? By like creating some very awkward sequels. But Indiana Jones was one. I think Deadpool is another one, where Jason Bourne is one, right? They just come up with a new international conspiracy, throw Jason Bourne in it. Ethan Hawke is another one. Just come up with a conspiracy theory, throw him into it. Like Deadpool is the same way. It's kind of like he can appear in any film. He can have his own films. He's just going to goof off as the plot around him does whatever it needs to do. And he'll be affected by that plot in some way. But it's very easy to get him to do that kind of stuff. What about Beetlejuice 2?
Oh man. Okay. Well, I gotta say, I am excited for this one. A number of reasons. I think the casting was perfect. What's her name? Jenna Ortega.
Yeah.
Oh, you couldn't have picked like that young lady's perfect for this role. I think, she looks the part. Fantastic. I like the title, even Beetlejuice. I thought that was really, really clever.
Yeah.
So does that mean that they have to make even a second sequel and call it Beetlejuice?
They probably will, because this one with Jenna in there is going to be a huge success, I'm sure. But like, does it need to be made? I mean, not necessarily. I don't think it needed to be made. I don't think anyone was really asking for like, oh, we need another Beetlejuice. But I think this is going to be one of those movies where technically, no one wanted it. No one really asked for it. But I think at the end of the day, I think we'll be glad that it exists. I think it's going to be a quality movie. And I think it's going to, it might even revitalize that whole franchise that's been kind of dead, no pun intended, for a while.
I'll even go one step further on that, dead in the water.
Yeah, right. There you go.
But I agree with you, OG. I am interested in this movie. I'm anticipating it. I don't think it actually needed to happen, but the fact that it is, and they got majority of the original cast back, obviously Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, Catherine O'Hara. But the one thing that I am a little bit concerned with Beetlejuice, is I hope that, and this is coming off of Tim Burton, so it's kind of a hit or miss with him, with his films. That's my one.
Is he doing this one too?
He's doing this one too.
Interesting. Okay.
Which is great because he did the original. So I'm happy about that. But as I said, with him, it's kind of a hit or miss with his films. And I hope he doesn't go the route that they did with Hocus Pocus 2. Because I feel like what they did with Hocus Pocus 2 is they diluted the Sanderson sisters in a way where it kind of gave Winifred Sanderson a heart to say, oh yeah, well, I'll let the children go. I'll sacrifice myself to go be with my sisters. Yeah, it's very touching, but for those characters, it doesn't fit.
Right.
For me, if you go back and you watch the first movie, it's like you just now I believe that they're creating I think a third Hocus Pocus where it goes back in time even further, like where it's going to touch upon more of the Sanderson sisters as children. So again, it's going to give them more personality, and I get that to an extent, but it's like I loved how Hocus Pocus showcased the main characters as villains.
Well, and this is the risk. This kind of brings everything into focus here with the whole conversation, right? With like when you take an existing franchise or a movie and you add new characters or even add new elements to old characters, even you run a risk of ruining it, or tainting it at the very least. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And
so I just
hope, making it better.
And that's what makes me concerned about Beetlejuice, is because Beetlejuice technically isn't a good guy, but he's not necessarily a villain, so to speak. But he's like in like that. He's like in limbo, no pun intended. So, but I hope that Tim Burton doesn't do to the character of Beetlejuice in the sequel of what they did with the Sanderson sisters in Hocus Pocus 2.
That's fair.
I'm going to give you my Beetlejuice opinion, but first I have to say I thought of another sequel that I think introduces characters really well and then cheats on one of their characters. Avatar 2. Phenomenal introduction to the family. It really matters to Jake's development and to I can't remember Jake's wife's name in the film.
Neytiri,
thank you. I was like, it starts
always
with an N.
On George, he has all the names.
Yeah, he's got it all. He's like a treasure trove of knowledge.
He's got the eagle, and he's got from Rescuer Down Under. He's got it all in there. Just add George.
Oh, we need the eagle drop actually for George in a minute. There we go. But I think that they do a great job with that film, making us care about all of those characters. The cheat code is somehow Palpatine has returned, but it's the same villain from the first film, just in an Avatar body. Right? That was a little bit of a cheat code. But so Beetlejuice, I'm going to take the negative on this one. I think that Beetlejuice is going to be I think that it's predominantly a cash grab that has no story need at all to it. And I'm really curious as to how they're going to pull it off in a way that makes someone like me compelled to see it, because I'm not even that big of a fan of the first one. So I'm just thinking to myself, like, what? I don't have an excuse to go see this film. And it's like a 80s kind of classic film where, so Top Gun Maverick 2, or Top Gun Maverick, I should say, Top Gun 2, has no reason to exist. But it captured all of the nostalgia of the first one in such a way that we just went like, cool, man. Beetlejuice might be Top Gun Maverick of 2024, but I can't see a reason why it would be more than that, right? Like I can't see a reason of it being like, oh, okay, this is phenomenal cinema. It's going to win an Oscar, right? Like, it doesn't seem like we're going down that path. So I'm interested to see what happens there.
Well, and you make a good point though, Jay. I'm excited to see it, but you do make a valid point though when you say cash grab, because I feel like I think I forgot. Is it Warner Brothers who does Beetlejuice? I think it's Warner.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. Warner.
I think it was Warner.
Actually, let me see. This is not giving me a fast answer. Yeah, Warner Brothers.
Warner Brothers. Okay. So I think Warner Brothers looked at the success of like the Netflix like Sabrina show, which I actually really liked that show a lot. It was great. It was kind of that dark. It was like a young person kind of dark thriller kind of show, whatever you want to call it. And then also Jenna Ortega's show.
I prefer the original, but I just liked looking at Melissa Joan Hart. So
there you go. Yeah, exactly. That was George's first crush. And then Jenna Ortega's show Wednesday, which is kind of the same vibe and tone of that Sabrina show that Netflix had. So I think Warner was probably looking at some of these successful kind of like these young, like these teenage kind of young, maybe early college kid age kind of shows on Netflix, and they're really working, they're really doing well. And they're thinking, hey, we could take an existing franchise we have, Beetlejuice, and we can sort of do something similar like what they did with Wednesday and what they did with Sabrina, and do it with Beetlejuice. I think that might be what you're saying, Jay. Like in terms of cash grab, it kind of feels like in that same vein, and Warner's kind of capitalizing on that trend.
Yes.
I don't know.
In your defense, though, in your defense, and to George's earlier point, because Tim Burton is sometimes hit or miss. Wednesday was a hit, and they gave Wednesday a reason to exist, and made the story pretty compelling. So it's not it's not to say that it's for sure fire loser, but I am a little bit more concerned because I just don't know how they're going to incorporate all of the elements into the new film. So I don't know, man. I'm probably the most negative about it, but I'm not totally against it.
Yeah.
But how about we're all for Inside Out too, right? I think all of us already said like we're in, right?
Yes,
we're in.
What about let's do two more because there's quite a few more, but let's just do two more. What about Gladiator 2?
I honestly, I loved Gladiator. Don't get me wrong. I love that film, but I don't know. I really don't have any kind of interest even seeing this sequel.
I think that's like, for me, that's kind of like, it was a great film. I mean, I liked it too, but that feels like a one and done to me. You know,
it does.
I don't think I need a sequel. I mean, I don't know. It might surprise us. It might be, maybe we're like, wow, we really needed that after we see it, But for me, I don't know. That's a one and done. I don't know.
I feel like because Jay, you had mentioned Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's where all these studios are kind of banking for their buck because of that film. Because it's a sequel that came out many, many moons after the original, but yet it still created a relevance in nostalgia in the movie theaters. And I mean, that movie made bank. So people saying, okay, well, let's go back and see some of these older films that were successful. And maybe we can kind of create a story, non-story, if you will, like that can make sense, but people will just go just because of the title.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the thing with Gladiator.
Yeah, I think Top Gun has something that most movies don't have. And that is it has a sense of Americana about aviation that people are just kind of like, that sounds awesome, right? Like there's just a thing about that it feels very American. I mean, America probably has one of the most sophisticated aviation organizations, whether it's the commercial or especially on the I mean, we have the most sophisticated planes in the world, right? Like nobody even touches our planes, like our fighter jets. They're not even close. So like, I think that there's something there that like captures the imagination. I think though that Gladiator was not a great movie because it was about Rome. I mean, I know that Rome has its fans, right? Like there's a whole TikTok trend about ask your boyfriend if he thinks about Rome or whatever. But like the Roman Empire. So I think that Rome has its fans, but I don't think that it elicits the same kind of like we're automatically going to see the kind of special effects that are going to be in like a aviation centric. I mean, like aviation by itself, you're going to see the spectacle of flight to a certain extent, right? Now you could go to see the spectacle of Rome, that's fine. But the first Gladiator made money based off the depth of the story that it was, not based off like people just wanting to go see Rome, right? So I just feel like going back into that world needs an excuse, and I don't know what that excuse is. So I'm with you guys. I just can't see a reason that it's like, what's the point? Why go back into that world? Like, okay, just make a new story. Don't call it Gladiator, and then I'll probably be on board. But Gladiator 2, like, what are you gonna do with that? I don't know. It's
weird. It's like having like a Prince of Egypt 2 or something. It just doesn't feel. I don't know. It's just weird.
Yeah, I equate Top Gun Maverick just really quick. OG, I'll let you speak in a second, but I equate Top Gun Maverick to sort of the similar, but this movie was not as successful, and I think it was just maybe too niche. But Blade Runner having a sequel to me was like there's an excuse to tell stories in that world because that world is so fascinating. Like the environment is so fascinating, kind of like Avatar. The environment is so fascinating. There's a reason to tell stories in that world. And of course, Denis Villeneuve, I think, is one of the best visual directors of our time. So like adding him to that world is phenomenal. But Gladiator just doesn't feel like that to me. Anyway, sorry, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no. What was I going to say? Oh no, I forgot. Oh wait. Yeah. Oh yeah. I want to say actually one sequel that we totally forgot about, which is like honestly, this sequel has outshined the original. Yeah. Like no one even really remembers the original, but Terminator 2, T2.
Oh.
Yes.
I mean, that movie was so good, and no one even really remembers the first one.
I mean, even James Cameron said it. I mean, he said everything that he wanted to do in the first Terminator, he couldn't because the technology just wasn't there at the time for him. And then he's like, he purposely, like everything that he wanted to do came with Judgment Day. And it's like, it was perfect. Honestly, my favorite out of the Terminators.
Right. You couldn't get more success in terms of sequels go. You couldn't get more success than that one, you know?
Pretty much like cemented James Cameron as like a moneymaker too, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm on the interesting side of that because I actually think Terminator 1 is the most compelling film to me, which is, I know not everyone says that, but that's I feel like it's actually a really, especially for the budget that it was made for, like insanely good. All right, so this is the last one we'll do today. Although we could do like 3 shows on this, going through all these sequels.
Oh, easily. Oh, actually, it'd be interesting too one day if we asked Tones what he thinks about the Game of House of the Dragon characters being introduced. Well, that's a little different though, because that's based on the books, though, right?
Yeah, but it is a prequel. I mean, we could do a whole show with Tones. Tones is like the Game of Thrones guy.
He is. He is. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic just with that franchise alone with this topic.
Oh, dude, there's so much to talk about with sequels and characters and stuff in that. But last one I want to do, I want to see your reaction to this one because this is going to be interesting. Bad Boys 4. What do you guys think? What do you guys think of Bad Boys 4?
Okay, so I'm going to be a little bit biased on this one because I love the franchise. I think it's just it's movies that technically we don't need.
Yeah, but
it's more so just I don't know the relationship between Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, their characters together. It's just and what Michael Bay did with the films and everything. Again, it's like one of those things where it's like you don't need it, you don't know if you want it, but you'll take it.
It's interesting because of the whole buddy cop thing.
Yeah.
When you have subject material like that, they're cops, you know, so the material is endless. There's always going to be a crime that they need to solve, or you know what I'm saying. So technically, you can have 100 sequels of this thing. I mean, there's always going to be some crime they gotta, you know, or whatever.
Yep.
I don't know. Do we need it? I don't know. Probably not. Probably not. I think story wise, you could probably, like I said, you can mine that genre forever. It's unlimited material, you know what I'm saying? It's like you know, NCIS or whatever, those FBI shows, they go on for like, you know, 19 seasons and stuff like that, you know.
Totally.
But it's just like, I don't know. And I think this franchise it's kind of for me personally, I think it can kind of go, but everyone's different.
What do you think, Jay?
Well, two things. One, I think a better career decision for Will Smith would have been to hold out for like 5 or 6 years, maybe 7 or 8 years before making another film. Personally speaking,
after the slap.
Yeah, after the slap. After not just the slap, but like the Will Smith's family, I'm sure, are fantastic people. But they have made it their business to be the second version of the Kardashians.
Absolutely.
And so if you're going to do that, like, fine, you can make yourself famous that way. You can do that. I'm not hating against you. That's fine. It's not for me. I don't think that is associated with making great film. The two are not associated. You don't see a lot of like controversial figures going around making films that people love because Jake Paul showed up in a film or Logan Paul showed up in a film. Like the two things are different things. One is a reality show about our times, and another is like great films. And I just think that, like, I know that I shouldn't equate Will Smith's entire family to Will Smith, but like I would tell you right now, like I would love to make a fantastic film with Will Smith. However, I don't want any of the drama that comes with the rest of that crew. Like I just do not want to even touch that. That sounds crazy to me. I don't want to show up on Red Tabletop talk one day, and have Jada asking me about my personal life and things that I don't want to answer. So I would have held off if I were Will Smith. Give us another 5 years before you come and do this film. Unlike George, I've never been a fan of this particular franchise. I see a place for it. And if you like it, that's fantastic. That's great. But from my standpoint, I think, George, you'd probably agree that like Bad Boys is the early 90s version of what really fun 80s films were.
Yes.
Right?
Oh,
like,
yes.
Like they almost didn't need a reason to exist. We were just going to do it because
we're just going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a fun time. And I think that there's a really strong, good place for those kind of films in cinema. I'm just with streaming and stuff like that, I just don't even know where those films fit anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what it means to go to the theater anymore. The only time I go to the theater is when there's a film that I just do not want to get spoiled on. And it's just like, I have to see that in the theater because the visual aspect of being in the theater is just so stunning.
Kind of going back a little bit, are you going to go see Deadpool and Wolverine in theaters?
Yes, I will definitely see that in theaters. So the only movies I'm going to see in theaters this year is I might see Inside Out 2 in a theater, just because I have so much respect for the first one and think it's so good. Deadpool I will definitely see because it is the first MCU movie. You said it, OG, but I feel the same way. It's the first MCU movie that I've been excited for. Now, Guardians 3 I was excited for as well because I love what James Gunn is doing there. But in terms of like an MCU film that I wasn't going to see because I like the director, it's the first MCU film I'm actually legit excited for. Probably, if I exclude Guardians of the Galaxy, probably since Endgame. Like it goes all the way back there. Like there were other ones that I was probably excited for. Then I went to see them and I was like, this is just not good. Right?
For me, it was Endgame, Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yes.
And now Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yes.
That's fair. That's fair. Now, I will say one nice thing about Will Smith right now. Last year, I had my colonoscopy. First one ever.
Yeah.
And he has a video on his YouTube. I think it was his YouTube channel, actually, about his colonoscopy experience.
Oh, no way.
And I watched it the morning of my colonoscopy, and it kind of put my anxiety to ease a little bit. So shout out to Will Smith helping me through the colonoscopy. I'll give him that much.
And I have to say this. It definitely helped you out. I don't necessarily know how it was a compliment tying Will Smith to a colonoscopy.
It's a great video. If you're ever gonna, George, when you're old enough and you have to do
probably in 10 years, I'll be eating those words. In 10 years, I'll be typing in Will Smith colonoscopy. It's like
George will be in the waiting room with his phone watching the Will Smith video.
I think I don't want to be too harsh on Will Smith either because I actually really like Will Smith, and I think like from if you ask me, Jay, you're going to direct a new movie, and we can probably get Will Smith, and we can either even get Jada. I would be like, they're both phenomenal performers. Like they've done amazing work before. I just don't like. Can we just do it, and I don't have to worry about what happens at the premiere? Can we just do it and you don't talk about it on Red Table Talk? Can we just do it in a way that I don't have to deal with any of the fallout from whatever's going to happen in this scenario?
Right.
So that's where it's coming from me. It's not coming from a talent standpoint. It's not coming from both of them are remarkably talented, phenomenal actors. I just the whole thing when it goes to reality centric drama, I'm out, man. Like,
if you ever work with Jada, just make sure, Jay, in the contract you mention that she can't talk about Tupac.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, the last thing I need is a Will Smith slap. That sounds terrible. But Martin better make a joke about that. Yeah. That better come up as a joke in some way, shape, or form. Now, I will say Martin Lawrence is sort of, I think, one of the most underrated comedians of the 90s. I mean, the dude is hilarious.
Oh, dude, his show was fantastic.
Yeah, his show's fantastic. So we'll see what happens there. But so there's plenty of sequels coming out. We talked about a few of them. Leave us some comments down below. We didn't talk extensively about Moana 2, so leave us some comments about Moana 2 down in the chat. And if you have any Story Geeks suggestions, I mean, George is a treasure trove of suggestions. But if you have any suggestions, leave us a comment down below. Stay tuned. We're gonna do one on Deadpool 2, which will probably happen sometime in mid-June, because I do have a really fun announcement to make here on the Orange Grove 55 channel. We have our first screening of No Vacancy scheduled. So we will be screening No Vacancy. If any of you are out there and you're going to be at the Cinegear convention that is out in at Warner Brothers, on the Warner Brothers studio lot, we will be screening No Vacancy on the Warner Brothers studio lot on June 8th. So hopefully YouTube screening to come. We'll talk about that. Hopefully other screenings to come that you can see it in person at a theater. But that's my announcement for the day.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Congratulations, Jay. And yeah, everybody at home, stay tuned. We'll be covering No Vacancy a lot.
Yeah. I can't wait to see it. I still haven't seen a cut of it. So we have 2 weeks before we're gonna be screening it, and I still need to see a cut of it and give my feedback on it. So it's gonna be a hectic 2 weeks, but I'm very excited about it. So so if you have any other topics, let us know. But we'll definitely be discussing Deadpool 2. And I'm sure we'll be discussing Deadpool and Wolverine in July after that comes out. George, what do you got coming up on Citrus Corner, and what's going on over at the social media that you got putting out there?
So right now, everything's kind of quiet down right now for Citrus Corner, just because not too much is coming out for Walt Disney World and the Disney Cruise Line right now. I do think that's all going to change coming in August when D23, when they start unveiling stuff. I'm hopefully that we'll be getting some bigger news, possibly with Moana coming into the Disney parks a little more. Possibly they're eyeing for Adventureland at the Magic Kingdom for a Moana attraction. The permit filings are continuing to go forward for Dino Land, the transferring over into the tropical Americas. And then hopefully we can hear more about that infamous Beyond Big Thunder mystery that we're all curious about.
Right. Daddy Josh has us on the edge of our seats.
Yeah.
You know, he's such a tease.
All he's going to give you guys is another piece of concept art.
Right?
Here's a new trash can coming in 2027, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's hilarious.
But so definitely keep an eye out for it. But hey, things pop up every day, breaking news, and we will definitely be there to cover it, whether it's Walt Disney World, Disneyland, Disney Cruise Line, the international parks, whatever it is. You could find it on Orange Grove 55.
Oh yeah,
nice. Check it out, and then follow you over on X. You're over on X.
Yes, you can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You can also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you'll find me on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
There we go.
Excellent. Go follow him. OG, where can the folks find you, and what kind of videos do you have coming up next?
Yeah, well, we just dropped today. We just dropped a Hey Bricky reaction video. We've been having a great time reacting to a lot of his stuff. He did a whole thing about where a third park might go at Disneyland Resort. So we reacted to that. Fantastic stuff. I mean, he is really, like we said earlier, on his game, doing really fun videos. So we did that today. We have actually a live show coming up this upcoming week on Friday with a friend of the channel, Alia.
Nice.
Alia is coming on to do a live show to talk about her adventures by Disney, George, or
Adventures by Disney.
Adventures by Disney. Okay. Adventures by Disney experience like a month or so ago. So she's going to come on Friday. Fantastic. And I'm trying to think who else we got coming on this week. We got Mr. Webba coming on, and we got Sean Ranking the Mouse. He's coming on this week. So
Nice.
A lot of park stuff, and it'd be cool. It'd be really cool. But Jay, again, awesome show. Always love doing Story Geeks with you. And you can find me here on Orange Grove 55. You can find me on Instagram at Orange Grove 55, and you can find me on X, Orange Grove 55. And Elon finally changed the site. Now it's X.com.
Oh, it is really?
It's
no
X.com.
way.
Yeah.
Not know that.
So it's official now. It's X.
It's official now. Well, you can find me over on pretty much just YouTube at this point. Every once in a while, I'm on Instagram, but not that much. I send reels to these two guys. If I find a funny Disney reel, I'll send it their way. But you can find me on YouTube on How Stories Work with Jay Sherer. And this, I'm hoping to get it out this week. I have a video coming out that has already been recorded. I just need to edit it for explaining the meaning behind Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane is ranked as the best movie of all time by the American Film Institute, and it's a very deep character study. So I'm just breaking down what it means, what I think it means, and all of the details that people may have missed in that film. So you can check that out on How Stories Work with Jay Sherer, and then probably see some behind the scenes stuff in regards to the No Vacancy screening. I'm going to try to film while I'm there. Cool. So just to kind of bring everybody into the experience, because I think it'll be a really fun experience. I will say this one thing to just state about the No Vacancy screening. It is just it's a crew only screening, because the whole crew is going to be at this conference. So there's still a future date where we'll have all of the cast that we'll do a screening with as well. This isn't that. This is just the crew for now. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. George, fantastic topic. I'm sure you'll come up with another one, and we'll have another show soon. But stay tuned for the. Oh, he's already. There he goes. Let me check I got to check my text messages. But yeah, we'll have the Deadpool 2, digging deeper into Deadpool 2. We'll have that later in June as well. And thanks everybody for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye.
Bye-bye.